All right, class. Sorry, I am not here today. I have an appointment. However, we're still going to get the notes on this worksheet done because I think most of the front will be notes. In the back, you're going to end up doing yourself. All right? So for each of these, first of all, please make sure you write your name. Please write your name. And whatever period it is, please write the name and period. We're talking about transformations of lines. So first they give us an equation, y equals 4x. And this graph is not the graph for y equals 4x. This graph right here is called the linear parent function, which we should have talked about yesterday, but sometimes I forget to mention it, okay? This graph is the linear parent function, which is y equals x. That's what that graph is. So yes, please write down y equals x, because with the transformations, they want to know how would this graph look compared to your linear parent function, all right? So what is the slope of this one? The slope of this one, remember the slope should have an x with it. So please write that in there. That will help you remember. The slope should always have an x with it. The slope for this one is 4. The slope of the linear parent function, notice, what is the invisible number that's in front of this x? It's an invisible 1. So how does this slope compare? I don't know. We will see. All right, so y-intercept. Do you notice? Remember, for your y-intercept, that means there should be a number that doesn't have an x. This y-intercept is 0, 0. Yes, you must write it as a point. 0, 0. The y-intercept should always be 0, whatever the b value is. So please write that. All right. So the next part, we need to talk about, does it shift up or down? All right, does it shift up or down? Shift up or down kind of goes with y-intercept. So please draw a line here because the shift up or down goes with the y-intercept. More or less steep goes with the slope, okay? So please know, shifting up or down goes with the y-intercept. More or less steep goes with the slope. And the way to tell if it's more or less steep or if it shifts up or down is to actually go ahead and graph it. So let's graph this one together. Let's first graph this one together. So to graph this one, notice it doesn't, the y-intercept is 0, 0, so we start in the middle. And then this is 4, so we go up 2, 3, 4 over 1. Notice we don't have enough room to do it again. So if we go backwards, we go down 2, 3, 4 to the left 1. And we'll talk about more of the graphing a little bit later. So if you go ahead and connect those 2 points as straight as possible, and yes, it should pass right through the origin. I know my line's not too straight, but remember, we don't have a ruler, so that's okay. So notice, does the line shift up or down? That means, is my y-intercept changed from 0, 0? No. So I would put no. No shift. However, more or less steep, definitely. This line right here, the new line that I have drawn, is this way compared to my parent function. It is up, which means it is more steep. Let's talk about steepness really quick. Steep means the hill is very hard to walk up. If I had to walk up this purple line like a hill, my legs would hurt way more than they would hurt if I walked up this y equals x line. Stretch or compress, since it's more steep means it's definitely stretching. It's a stretch. Another way to know if it's stretch or compress is, and let's write that in the corner right here. Stretch means my slope will be greater than 1, and compress means that my slope would be less than 1, or actually in between 0 and 1. I know that notation looks a little bit weird to you, but remember this means it's in between 0 and 1. M means it's greater than 1. However, you cannot look at the negative, and we'll talk about it in the next one. So take a look here. First, let's figure out what the slope is. Remember, the slope is the number that has the x next to it. So, which one has the x next to it is the -3. The y-intercept is the number that does not have the x next to it. However, what is with this 5 is this sign right here. So the y-intercept is 0, -5. And like I said, yes, you must write the x, y. Now, does it shift up or down? This helps you tell. Does it shift up or down? Since the b is -5, maybe we should write that. b equals -5, that means it's shift down. And more or less steep shall we answer? Well, let's go ahead and graph it first, okay? Let's graph this one together again. Starting at the -5, because the b is always on the y-axis, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're starting down there at the bottom. We don't really have room to go down 3 to the right one, so let's go up 3 to the left one, up 3 to the left one, up 3 to the left one. So the graph should look like this. Please do not be concerned if you're not good with graphing, because I'm going to show you how to use your calculator to graph it, so you don't have to worry about trying to graph it the quick way. You can just plot your points, okay? And I'll do that next for the next one. So we know our slope is -3, our y-intercept is -5. We know it shifts down because the b is -5, but we need to figure out if it's more or less steep. Once again, this one is definitely going to be more steep. And let me tell you the reason why. This one is definitely more steep. However, stretch or compress, we need to talk about this. Notice this number, it is a -3, but we need to ignore the negative to tell if it's stretch or compress. Stretch or compress, I'll say it again, the only way to tell if it's stretch or compress is to ignore the negative and think, is this number greater than 1 or less than 1? If it is greater than 1, that means once again it's going to be a stretch. Ignoring the negative, it is a stretch because it's greater than 1. Now let's go ahead and talk about this one, and then when we graph this one, I will show you how to use your calculator to plot the points. Okay. So, first question is, what is the slope? The slope is the number that's with the x. Did you hear that? It's the number that's with the x. And in this case, this number is -1. So the slope is -1. The b is 2, so the y-intercept is 0, 2. And that can help us know whether it's shift up or shift down. Remember, the shift down was if the b was negative. So this one is a shift up because the b is positive. Now we want to tell if it's more steep or less steep. Well, let's go ahead and now graph it so we can see if we can determine the steepness. Okay. Now, some people are not that good at graphing, which you will be as soon as you see this. So let me just clear my calculator first. In your y equals, put this equation. Negative, make sure you press the negative sign, not the subtraction. Press your x right here, plus 2. Then go to second graph and just plot some of those points. Remember, this is not the graph you need. You need to plot these points to find the new graph. So I'm just going to plot a couple of them, like -2, 4 I'm going to start with. -2, then up. Here's my first dot, my first point. Then -1, up 1, 2, 3 is my next point. Then 0, up 2 is my next point. Once you plot some of them, you could definitely tell the pattern. It looks like this one's going down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. Now I can see my pattern, or you can just keep plotting the points. If you can't see the pattern, just keep plotting the points. And there's my line. Now we can't really tell if the excuse me, if the line is steeper because they're going separate ways. This one is negative, this one's positive. But remember, this one is definitely more Actually, you know what? This one's not really more steep. This is the same steepness. So don't write that. It's the same steepness because it's a 1, so just kind of skip this step. But you should be able to tell me if it's stretched or compressed by looking at the slope. Looking at the -1 slope, ignoring the negative. Is this number greater than 1 or is this number less than 1? It's actually equal to 1. So this one's kind of a bad example, but this one is just like a normal line. I mean, it's not really stretched, it's not compressed. This is just the basic line. The next one should be a lot better when we do this one. Please write down the slope and y-intercept for this one. All right, so if you remembered, hopefully the slope you wrote down was 2/5. The y-intercept, which is the b, is 0, 1. All right, so let's go ahead and, I mean, you can kind of tell if it's shift up or down by looking at the b. If the b is positive, shift up. If the b is negative, shift down. However, more or less steep, let's go ahead and graph it. So for this one, once again, I'm going to put in my fraction. Remember, if you're putting fraction in the calculator, press alpha y equals and then enter, and that will get a nice pretty fraction. Alpha y equals, press enter, then you can put your nice pretty fraction. Alpha, which is the green button, then y equals, then enter, will get a nice pretty fraction. You put your 2 on top, your 5 on the bottom, then go over, so you can press x plus 1. Let's press second graph and plot some points. Ooh, look at these points. Ew, some of these points are not too happy. But if you can find a nice point, you see this one, -5, -1. I'm going to use that one. -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1. I'm going to use that one, -5, -1. Then I'm going to go down to a better one, 0, 1. 0 up 1. Then I'm going to go find another perfect point, 5, 3. Perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. That's better. I only plotted the whole number points, and look, didn't I still get a nice graph? See? See? Okay. Okay. So, shift up, we already saw that this line, definitely it was at the 0, 0. Now it's up here at the 0, 1. Now, more or less steep. Now, this is our original line. Notice the new line is decreased. So it's definitely going to be less steep. And if we take a look at our slope, this is a better example to tell if it's stretched or compressed. Remember, at the top of our paper, we wrote down stretch is when your m is greater than 1. Compress is when your m is in between 0 and 1. So this m right here, 2 divided by 5, 2 divided by 5 is the same thing as, if I put it in my calculator, is the same thing as 0.4. That's how I know 0.4 is less than 1, so this one is definitely compressed. Because the m value is less than 1, it's a 0.4. All right? Now try the rest on your own, but be careful because this one definitely tries to trick you because they put the slope back here. And the slope, notice it does have a negative sign with it. All right? Have fun. Please finish the rest of the worksheet, then we will talk about it tomorrow. And make sure you turn it in at the end of class. Yes, it is due at the end of class. You should get through, I'm thinking, at least 3 or 4 of them. Flip it over to the back and keep on answering the questions.